What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Redonkulous Gaming. Today we're going to do Torghast for Dummies. Yes, we are going to be your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about Torghast now that we have a sparkly, brand new, shiny launch date for Shadowlands, and we know we're going to be playing in November. It's time to talk about a piece of the endgame that is going to be incredibly important for everyone, regardless if you like to PvP or PvE. You're going to be spending a good amount of time in Torghast for a variety of reasons. So in this video, we are going to talk about the requirements for accessing Torghast on your first character. We're going to talk about some of the currency in Torghast, Phantasma specifically, and what you can purchase with that currency. We're going to talk about your Anima Powers, souls, quests, puzzles, and then we're going to end with Torghast configurations as well as rewards, and we'll even dabble a little bit in the challenge mode twisting corridors. And if you want to jump around this video, it's very much encouraged. I'll be putting timestamps to let you guys know where to jump around to so that you can take advantage of just really watching the pieces that you may not have full knowledge about. However, if you're brand spanking new to the idea of Torghast and what it is, what it isn't, I do encourage you to watch this video through from the beginning all the way to the end. And as always, please like, subscribe, and then leave feedback if you don't like something or if you do like something, and let me know if this is exactly what you're looking for or if it's missing some detail and you want a little bit more. Always happy to go back, revise, and then obviously engage with the community of people who take the time to watch my videos. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. Let's jump into the Torghast requirements and how you're initially able to access Torghast for the first time. You're going to need two things. You're going to need to first max out your character. You got to have a level 60 character, and then you have to select your covenant. This is very important because Torghast will not open until you've selected your first covenant and capped your first character. There will be a covenant quest line that will send you into the Maw. This will then begin a quest chain which will lead to unlocking Torghast, and specifically access to the Torghast. There will be a portal that opens, and it'll also give you access to the Rune Carver. If you're not familiar with the layout of Torghast, we'll go ahead and talk about it very briefly. You will zone in right where it's shown here. Immediately then to your right will be the Rune Carver's chamber. That is where you're going to go to bring soul ash and your legendary recipe components to the Rune Carver to be able to craft your legendary gear. Now, if you're just going to participate in the endless dungeon mode of Torghast, you're going to go and you're going to climb some stairs and you're going to go up and you're going to notice that there's a big circle and a bunch of different entry points. The entry points to the north, the three there, and then the three along the east side of the map are the basic ways in which you enter Torghast. The ones to the south, the twisting corridor, that is the challenge mode of Torghast, and we'll come back and we'll circle back on that later. But overall, this gives you a good idea of when you zone in what you're dealing with. So it's the bottom floor, right to your right is where you access the Rune Carver, and then you go up some stairs to be able to partake in the endless dungeon. Now, you can enter Torghast as either a party or solo. So your party can be, 2 players all the way up to 5 players, or it can just be yourself. The neat thing about Torghast is that you absolutely can use your covenant abilities inside of Torghast. So it's not like other endless dungeons where you're restricted to specific dungeon powers and that certain external powers are not able to be accessed. There's no gating whatsoever. The entire toolkit of your character is accessible once you access Torghast. All of that being said, the player power outside of Torghast does not work in the outside world. So everything that you gain within Torghast is then gone the second you end your run. When you first zone into your first run of Torghast, you'll notice that you are affected by a debuff. That debuff is going to be called Jailer's Chains. This is going to lock your armor loadout as well as your talent loadout. So you will be unable to change your gear and you will be unable to change your talents upon entering a Torghast run. There will be things called torments that are either going to empower mobs or debuff players that are applied as you advance to higher floors. So one of those two things are going to be true. As you climb the floors of Torghast, you will either notice that mobs are getting buffed or you are getting debuffed, and those are called torments. Now, the neat thing about Torghast is that you can run it and take your time. It is 100% untimed, so this isn't a race against time or anything like that, but you are absolutely capped to the number of deaths. Once you reach the height of your deaths, so if you enter as a solo player, you are allowed at the beginning of your run 5 total deaths. If you die 5 times, something called a Terragru, which we'll go ahead and pop up here, just so you have something to look at. One of these baddies are going to spawn, and ultimately they're going to hunt you down. If it catches you, you will die, and you will be sent back to the beginning, and you will not be able to get around the Terragru to finish your run. So it will effectively end your run if you let the Terragru come up behind you and catch you and kill you. So keep that in mind. You hit your max death count, it doesn't kick you out right away. You do have a chance of finishing, but that chance is incredibly low. Now, the number of deaths will scale based on the number of players that you bring to a Torghast run. If you bring 2 players, you can have up to 8 deaths. 3 players brings it up to 10 deaths, 4 players brings it up to 13 deaths, and 5 players brings it up to 15 deaths. Next up, we've got our Torghast specific currency, and this is called Phantasma. This can be earned from killing mobs, breaking open phylacteries, or given as an Anima reward. The currency is lost upon leaving the run, however, so be sure to use it in the break room, which is going to be floor 3 of every run that you're doing, or before a boss fight, which is found on floor 6. You can use this at the friendly shackled broker NPC, and you'll be able to purchase a variety of items. The first of these items that's worth talking about is the plundered Anima cell. This costs 150 Phantasma, and the effect is that this flat out just makes an Anima orb appear. This Anima orb is then used to pick an Anima power, which you're going to use to empower your character for the duration of your Torghast run. Next up, we've got the Ravenous Anima Cell. This goes for 250 Phantasma, and this is where you turn a non-elite mob into an Anima orb. So it's just a really nice way to create yet another Anima orb out of really something that would not have rewarded it anyway. Next up, we've got the Obscuring Essence Potion. This goes for 100 Phantasma, and this removes a death from your counter. So if you're getting really close to making that Terragru spawn, you can go ahead and pop one of these bad boys, and you're going to be A-okay for at least 1 extra death. Next, we've got the Blinding Smoke Capsules, and this costs 100 Phantasma, and this is going to reduce the aggro range of mobs on you can either use it on yourself or your party. So if you're just trying to sneak by, or maybe you found a particularly challenging area of the floor of the run that you're on, you can go ahead and sneak by those mobs. It's actually really, really handy, and is relatively cheap at the rate in which Phantasma is currently dropping right now. Next up, we've got the Rejuvenating Siphoned Essence. This is a flat-out health and mana potion, which can be used in your Torghast run and only used within Torghast period. So not useful outside of the Endless Dungeon, just keep that in mind. Lastly, you can go ahead and buy a Fleeting Frenzy Potion. This goes for 125 Phantasma, and this is a flat-out increase to your damage by 30%. Now there is a catch, because this is a very, very strong buff. You actually have to be able, or you have to use this potion while you're already in combat, and then to keep the effect, you need to stay in combat. The second you exit combat, you actually lose the effect of that potion. So this is going to be something where it might really come in handy for speed runs, but as long as you're in combat, you're going to want to make sure that you're chain pulling so you don't lose this effect. So again, this one's really cool, but it does come with that disclaimer where you have to stay in combat or the effect will be lost. The Shackled Brokers may also carry Anima Powers. Keep in mind, you're not always going to be guaranteed to have every single one of these Anima Powers available for purchase, but if you're lucky enough, you can be able to stack up some really good Anima Powers early in the dungeon. The first one is Secret Spices. This is where you kill a Maw Rat, which increases your maximum health by 2%. This effect will stack up to 100% for the duration in which you are in the current run of Torghast. This is going to cost you 275 Phantasma, but it is really strong. There's a lot of these little critters called mall rats running around, and you can really kind of use them to bolster your character as you go. Next up, we've got Curious Miasma. This costs 125 Phantasma, and this is where when you attack a new creature or a new mob, you're healed for a portion of your health. So if you've got a relatively large pack, this is going to be one that's going to be really nice, but change your playstyle in a little bit because it's going to heal you each time you attack a new mob. So when that becomes your main target, you're going to get a small heal, and it's actually a really nice thing for sustainability throughout. It allows you to do some of the larger packs that are kind of tougher to do, especially if you're running solo. Next up, we've got Oberon Powers, and Oberon Powers come in a variety of different flavors. They all cost 65 Phantasma, and they all have different effects. Oberon Winds is going to increase your secondary stats by 3%. In this instance, it's haste by 3%. Oberon Venom is going to increase your critical damage and healing by a percentage. Currently, it was reduced down to 6. It used to be 10%. And lastly, there's going to be one that is going to increase your maximum health pool. It used to be 30%, but now it just got kicked down to 15% overall. So if you see any of these are obviously worth the grab because they are so darn cheap. Next up, we've got Bloating Fodder, and this is 65 Phantasma. This is where you're ultimately going to take all those little mall rats that are running around, and you're going to start to use them as a weapon against the other mobs in the run. Now, what this makes the mall rats do is explode. They explode upon death, and they do damage to nearby enemies. So you have yourself a mini corpse explosion as long as you're focusing down the mall rats first. They don't have as much health as the rest of the mobs in Torghast, so they're likely going to be the first targets to die anyway, and you can pull a little bit more liberally when you have this power. Lastly, Watchful Lightfly is an effect that your Shackled Broker may have. This costs 125 Phantasma, and it's where a Watchful Lightfly is essentially just going to come and help you do a little bit of extra damage against all of the targets in Torghast, and it's a nice little extra throughput, something that helps you get through maybe a tougher part of the dungeon overall, but it's not anything that is going to be earth-shattering by any means. Next up, we've got Anima Powers, and we talked a little bit about Anima Powers in the past, but now to give a more clear definition, you just saw I picked one there. Anima Powers are your player power, and this player power that you pick when you select an Anima Power is going to enhance your character, but it's for the duration of your Torghast run, the entirety of your run. So this is always active upon earning. So the second I clicked on that ability and I picked which Anima Power I wanted to add, it's now a part of my player power, and I'll be able to bring that with me through the end of that specific Torghast run. So again, it's active upon clicking, and it's linked until the end of the run. So your player power is going to grow and grow and grow throughout the duration of the dungeon. You can earn Anima Powers from multiple sources. You can get them from just random spawn points, which is what you just saw. You can kill empowered mobs, and then they'll end up dropping a little orb that you can click on right here. And then you pick your power, and then you can also go ahead and hunt out rares, and you'll be notified when there's a rare mob around. You'll get, the talking head emote or something that will call out, this is a dangerous enemy. You can also go around and smash phylacteries, so those little jars that are found in just about every single room. You can smash all the phylacteries, and the ones that actually have an Anima Power inside are going to have that like fuzzy little gray-black cloud at the very top of the phylactery, so you don't have to guess which phylacteries actually contain an Anima Power and which ones don't. But I do recommend smashing all the phylacteries because they do contain Phantasma as well, so even if they don't have an Anima Power in it, you're going to be in a better position when you encounter a Shackled Broker to be able to purchase, additional Anima Powers or other items with your Phantasma if you are beefing up your Phantasma by smashing phylacteries. So smash phylacteries. Say that 10 times fast. And then you can complete side objectives as well. And then you can also use your plundered Anima Cell item that you'll buy from the Shackled Broker, which will then create an Anima Orb and then allow you to pick your Anima Power. These powers range from common baseline things that ultimately are going to enhance your toolkit or help you perform a little bit better by enhancing, your certain skills, all the way up through epic Anima Powers. And you can unlock these epic Anima Powers just by chance. These powers are notable because you'll notice that some of these are actually legendary effects. One that I tend to encounter pretty frequently is the Metamorphosis on my Demon Hunter, the Metamorphosis Anima Power, which makes it so that my Metamorphosis is actually 100% larger and hits harder. So that is a legendary power that I can get by equipping a legendary item, but it's also an effect I can find in Torghast. Players are given a choice between powers, and you can ultimately pick your power based on something that optimizes your character or optimizes your party preferences. Now, the killing of rare mobs, as I mentioned, is a really good way to go and farm Anima Powers. And because these are not timed runs, it makes all the sense in the world to go ahead and hunt down the rare mobs. And again, just pay attention to the talking head cues. You'll be notified that there's a rare mob in your presence, and that'll let you know that you need to go hunt down the rare mob on your floor, or that you're in the presence of a rare mob already. So keep that in mind. They also reward Phantasma as well for killing them. So again, very much worth your while. Let's talk a little bit about souls. Souls that are found throughout Torghast. Now, you have the option of doing a couple of things with souls. At least you'll be presented with an option at some point in time during your Torghast runs. You can either free a soul, which is going to grant you a stackable buff. This buff is called Soul's Remnant's Blessing, and that's going to last for the duration of your run. Now, this buff, Soul Remnant's Blessing, is going to last through the entirety of your run, which I already mentioned, but this is going to increase your baseline strength, your agility, your intellect, so all the primary stats by 1%, and that is going to have a stacking effect. The second interaction that you can have with a soul is called Sacrificing Souls. This is going to grant yet another buff. This buff is called Soulbound Armaments. This is a 3-minute buff, which is going to increase your damage and healing, as well as your haste, by 10%. So you have the option of going with a stackable 1% buff, or on some runs you'll also be presented with the option of sacrificing those souls for a temporary 3-minute buff. It's going to depend 100% on where you are in the dungeon, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, so it's going to be very much situational, but ultimately it's going to be up to you to decide which of these interactions that you're going to want to have. Now, it's worth noting that every soul you encounter throughout Torghast does not always give you this option. In fact, a majority of them are going to have you just free the souls. And a couple of reasons for this. Now, and why in general you would want to free a soul is that it's ultimately going to give you the ability to advance your Covenant Sanctum. So if you free a soul, it grants you the freed soul currency. You bring those souls back to your Covenant Sanctum. You use the souls within your Covenant Sanctum to upgrade your Covenant, and therefore advance your storyline with that Covenant. So freeing souls is probably going to be the default mode for most people, at least early stages in the game, but later on, sacrificing souls, or later on in runs where you already have enough of the stackable buff built up, you may actually want to trade off and make the decision to sacrifice those souls and enhance your player power for a good 3 minutes. One of the really cool features, or actually two of the really cool features, are that you can find both quests and puzzles littered throughout your multiple Torghast runs. Now, quests can be granted by NPCs, and this can kick in as a bonus objective notification or as an actual quest. They'll have a quest that you can accept, and these always start and end on the same floor. That is very, very important to remember. I'll likely reiterate it later on, but they always start and end on the same floor. You'll never have to go up a floor, down a floor, exit Torghast. You will find it on the same floor in which you initiated that quest. it will reward the player or the party with Phantasma and an Anima Orb. So you will get both of the Torghast currency as well as an Anima Power to pick. Puzzles, on the other hand, have the exact same rewards, but they're sprinkled throughout the floors. And these puzzles can be chests like what you see here. They can be rune secrets that you need to unlock. They can come in multiple different flavors. And when you solve a puzzle, it'll reward you with treasure, potentially a rare mob will spawn, or it'll even open up a previously locked door. So what's really neat about Torghast in general is that they've taken some of the fun things that we encounter out in the open world and they've brought it within Torghast. So they've given the Endless Dungeon its own little spin to the point where, again, you don't necessarily want to feel forced to speed rush through Torghast. You probably want to explore each and every floor to the fullest to make sure that you're not missing out on any additional player power granted in Anima. Make sure you're not missing out on any additional treasure, rare mobs, or just the ability to explore an area that you could not access before. So the completionists are absolutely going to love the fact that they have quests and they have puzzles littered throughout Torghast, which is actually a really, really neat thing. Now for the fun part, we are going to talk about the configuration of Torghast. And this is something that I actually found relatively confusing until I actually got able to run Torghast on my own, start to navigate it on my own. It's something that clicks relatively quickly once you're actually doing it, but reading about it can be somewhat challenging. So I'm going to just pull up the map just to kind of give you guys a visual representation of what I'm talking about. Once you have access to Torghast, you zone in, and immediately to your south, you've got the Rune Carver's Chamber. We're going to ignore that for the sake of what we're talking about here, and we're just going to talk about the configuration of the different layers, wings, and all of that going forward. So, what does all this mean? Well, to the north, you'll notice that there are the fractured chambers. And so you've got 3 areas that you can zone in there. You've got the 3 areas to the east, and then you've got the 3 twisting corridors to the south. For the sake of just this small portion of the video, cross the twisting corridors off of your mind the best you can. Just pretend like it's not there. And we're just going to focus on the 6 different zoning areas to the north and then to the east. A couple of things that we need to do before I jump into explaining the configuration of all this is we need to define Blizzard's terminology for their version of Torghast being an endless dungeon, because it's not endless. There is an end to it. It's something that they can absolutely build out, and you can tell that that's probably something they're intending to do based on the fact that they've given definitions to words that may or may not be relatively confusing. So I'm going to try my best to eliminate that for you. So first off, Blizzard has defined a layer of Torghast as 6 floors. When someone refers to completing a run of Torghast, it's because they have completed 6 floors. So they've gone in, they've zoned in on floor 1, they've exited on floor 6 after killing the boss, and they've completed a run of Torghast, and therefore they've completed a layer. This will then unlock the next layer of Torghast for you to access. So 6 floors equals a layer. A wing equals 8 layers. So because we know that there are 6 floors per layer, we know that a wing consists of 48 specific floors. In each of these runs, you will encounter from floors 1 through floor 6, the 3rd floor of each layer is going to be your break room. Now, the break room is where you're going to find your buddy, the Shackled Broker. You will also find it on floor 6. Floor 6 is the boss room, and that is consistent with every single layer. The 6th floor is going to be the boss room, so your Shackled Brokers can be found on floors 3 as well as floor 6. That's where you're going to be spending your Phantasma, and you will need to spend that Phantasma in the current run of Torghast. So within that run, all the Phantasma that you've built up needs to be spent before you leave that run of Torghast. It disappears afterwards. You cannot carry that over into into another layer or into another run. That's very, very important. So interact with and buy out every piece of equipment, items, Anima Powers that you can from a Shackled Broker to make sure that you can easily breeze through the content in front of you. Now that we know all of that, right? We've got floor 3 down, we've got floor 6 down. Just know that there's a total of 6 wings, and those 6 wings are the ones to the north and then to the east. Those are the wings of Torghast. That is what you're going to be doing as your weekly chore. You're going to be running Torghast and completing 2 wings generally of the 6. So we've got 6 total wings, and we've got 3 twisting corridors. There are 288 floors across 6 total wings. There are 50 floor totals across the 3 twisting corridors. On any given week after a reset when Shadowlands launches, only 2 of the 6 wings are actually going to be accessible. It'll rotate weekly, and it'll probably have a rotation that is data mined and something that we can look up in the future, but as of right now, we don't know which 2 of the 6 wings are going to be active at any given time. So as much as Blizzard has coined this as an endless dungeon, you can only complete 2 of the 6 wings on any given week. A common thing to remember here is that the higher the layer and the higher the floor number, the harder the enemies. So the further you go into the layers, think of layers as like difficulty. So if I complete level 1, which is my first 6 floors, then I've completed difficulty 1. It then moves to difficulty 2, so on and so forth, all the way through 48 floors and 8 layers. So there's 8 difficulty levels, and then each floor you progress is going to increase in difficulty as well. Now, what are the rewards for completing this on a weekly basis? Good question. When you zone in, or when you go to pick your run that you're going to be doing in Torghast, you are presented with an interface that looks like this. And this interface is going to allow you to pick the layer that you would like to run, as well as reflect the reward that you'll be getting by completing the said run. And the primary driver for all of us running Torghast is going to be Soul Ash. Soul Ash is what you get by completing a layer and then unlocking the next layer. You then can preview what the next layer is going to provide in terms of Soul Ash, but keep in mind that your Soul Ash is going to be capped weekly. There's going to be a point in which you hit diminishing returns for running Torghast where you're just doing it for fun. So pay attention to that. If you're only doing Torghast for Soul Ash, you're likely going to stop running it when you hit that diminishing return portion. Now, you bring that Soul Ash down to our Rune Carver buddy, just south of where you zone in, along with a legendary recipe and the mats that are required for your secondary stats, and you can go ahead and create your new legendary items. Your freed souls are also going to be used to advance your Covenant Sanctum. So you do Torghast to advance your Covenant Sanctum. We talked about that already. And then lastly, and this is actually pretty darn important, as it stands right now in beta, half of the overarching legendary recipes are actually parked as rewards within Torghast, which is a little goofy. So odds are, maybe maybe we start to see this change as we get closer to release, especially now that we have a release date. But I think what Blizzard did is they parked a good chunk of their recipes in Torghast and kind of marked them as drops from Torghast because they just didn't know where else to put them in game. If Shadowlands goes live this way and we somehow are getting, half of our legendary recipes by running Torghast, you can bet a lot of people are going to spend a ton of time in Torghast to be able to get those legendary powers. So I say that, but I say that with an asterisk. Just know that reward item can change and that Blizzard can at will and very freely move around the drop and the drop rates of the legendary powers and the legendary crafting recipes. All right, we're on to the last leg of our Torghast video here. So to make up this last section, we're going to talk challenge mode, which is the twisting corridor option of Torghast. You can find the 3 twisting corridors to the southernmost point of Torghast Tower, and they're labeled here on the map just to make it nice and easy to see exactly where you need to go. Now, a couple of things about twisting corridors, because it's a little bit more of the same, but twisting corridors and it being a challenge mode is slightly different than the rest of the way that Torghast is really kind of configured. So a twisting corridor equals 3 layers that are 18 floors. Each of those floors are randomly chosen from these 6 wings, and they're stitched together to compile an 18 floor run. So the way that they're made up is it's somewhat randomly generated based on the other 6 wings of Torghast and the way that they're kind of themed. So when you're running twisting corridors, you don't necessarily know which of the themes you're going to get, and therefore you don't necessarily have an idea of the way the entire run is going to be laid out. And the other way is that this is different is that instead of doing a 6 floor run and then moving on to the next layer, you are doing an 18 floor run. Now, you get a couple of things from doing the twisted corridor. The first of which is this good looking guy. This is the pet that you'll be getting as a reward once you've completed the second layer of the twisting corridors. You'll then be given a toy, which is the Helm of the Dominated. And that'll essentially allow you to become a Mossworn looking guy. And you get that from completing the 4th layer. You'll get a title reward at layer 6. And then lastly, and probably the thing that everyone is going to be gunning for early on, is you're going to be getting the Corridor Creeper mount by completing layer 8 of the challenge mode of the twisting corridors. The mount looks like this. It's a pretty darn cool looking mount. It's really like a ghost bear type looking thing. But the reason why people are going to be chasing this is because it is currently the only mount that can be used in the Maw. So the earlier you get this mount, the better quality of life you're going to have for your main characters, for your alts. So a lot of people are likely going to be pushing the challenge mode of Torghast right out of the gate. So there you go. That makes up our Torghast for Dummies video. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Like, subscribe, or tell me you hate it. That's okay too.